I should be live now. Hello everyone, welcome to my new episode of What's Up in Archaeology. Today we're going to talk about skin color. Basically the genes are responsible for giving our skin the pigmentation that we have. Now I'm not going to present any real opinions on this study because it can be taken in a lot of ways. The only way that it is valid for it to be taken is the scientific way, and that is human diversity. And that is about it. All right, I'm going to start the share the screen as always. This study was published in the Science Daily. There's also the actual study which was published in Science, the magazine, and because it's behind the paywall, I can't ethically put it in the description. But it doesn't mean that people shouldn't not learn, if you get my drift. Just one last thing. How's the sound coming through? I know there's a bit of a delay because I am using OBS again, and I know there's about a 20 to 30 second delay. So if you guys want to say how's the sound, I've added noise reduction to stop out the background noise, and I want to see how it is, if it's too woody, to whatever, because I have to turn off all the other sounds. So awesome. So let's get on with the article. It's from the Science Daily. In the description I have the New York Times article, and if you guys want to read it, because you will see the difference between a science journalism with some good credence and a common and a mainstream media quote-unquote science journalism. So read them. I recommend you guys read the articles that I post, and all the descriptions, all the sources which I post, because they are more interesting than I am. I'm just regurgitating what's basically there. So let's get started. Genes are responsible for the diversity of human skin colors have been identified. Of course they are. They have been identified. We have known them for a while, but now they've expanded the scope of the genes. It's from the source is from the University of Pennsylvania. It's quite recent, so it's basically last week. Very, very recent. The study of diverse African groups by geneticists have identified new genetic variants associated with skin pigmentation. The findings help explain the vast range of skin color on the African continent. I'm emphasizing this, so I will emphasize certain key phrases for obvious reasons. I will not say them because they'll probably be demonetized already, but I am emphasizing them for their scientific valor and why certain points of view are invalid, basically. So they shed light on human evolution and inform an understanding of the genetic risk factors for conditions such as skin color. We will start it now. Human populations have a broad palette of skin tones. Yes, we do. It is a continuous. There's a word for it. It's called decline. It's a continuous variation, a continuous line that goes from light to dark. But until now, few genes have been shown to contribute to normal variations in skin color, and those had primarily been discovered through studies of European populations. Yes, there's a a range of implications on this phrase, but I won't go into them now. Now, a study of diverse African groups led by the University of Pennsylvania geneticists have identified new gene variants associated with skin pigmentation. The findings help explain the vast range of skin color on the African continent. Biologists have been and anthropologists have been saying this since 1968. They shed light on human evolution and inform an understanding of the genetic risk factors such as conditions such as skin cancer. Now, that we have identified a new genetic variants that contribute to the genetic basis of one of the most strikingly variable traits in modern humans, said Sarah Tishkoff. I'm going to increase. I think that's better. Yes, it's better. A pen integrates knowledge professor and the David and Lynn Stilfen University professor in genetics and biology, with appointments in the Perelman School of Medicine. Yeah, she has a long list of credentials. Valid ones, by the way. Not putting any disparaging marks on this. They are very good from what I've read, as I was investigating this, reading it, and so I went to see that it's the good schools. When people think of skin color in Africa, most would think of a darker skin, but we show that within Africa there is a huge amount of variation, ranging from skin as light as some Asians to the darkest skin on the global level, and everything in between. It's a gradient of colors. That's the word I was trying to find out before when I said Klein, but it's the same thing. A gradient and a Klein are the same thing. A gradient from the light to the dark. We identified genetic variants affecting these traits and show that the mutations influence light and dark skin have been around for a long time, since before the origins of modern humans. Yes, and I will go into that a little bit later. So it goes back. It's human evolution, our evolution as a species. The findings were published in the journal Science. Unfortunately, I have the link to it, but it's behind a paywall, so you will only see the introduction, basically, and the synopsis of it. But this article that I'm reading is basically a very good summation of it. So if anyone wants to delve into the actual article, I'm sure you'll find a way. The findings of the senior author collaborated with the first author, the lab member Nicholas Crawford, a postdoctoral fellow and a multi-institutional international team. So they went not just from the Pennsylvania state, they went to other universities. Tishkoff, I think that's how you pronounce it, has long studied the genetics of African populations, looking for traits such as height, lactose tolerance, bitter taste sensation, and high altitude adaptation. Now, I've done a video, and I'll do another one on this high altitude adaptation. We have known that Eurasian peoples, especially on the eastern parts of Eurasia, and especially most likely around the higher plateau regions like Tibet, have genes which they have inherited from the mixing of Homo sapiens sapiens and one of our cousins. In this case, the high altitude gene is from the Denisovans, and I've mentioned this in a past video. Now, skin color emerged as a trait of interest from her experience working on the continent and seeing the diversity present across groups. That is very, very comprehensive. Of course, if you live in an area, if you travel around an area of such a vast, a huge continent like Africa, you are bound to see regional differences. And not just regional differences, but across regional differences. And you will see that there is not just one type of people that inhabited an area, but a huge mixing pot of peoples. Now, skin color is a classical variant trained in humans, and thought to be adaptive. Of course, it is adaptive. Tishkov said analysis of the genetic basis of variations in skin color shed light on how adaptive traits evolved, including those that play a role in disease risk. I'm going to, let's see, where do I have it? In the description, I put in a small article on Neanderthals, my favorite peoples. And that article just basically summarizes that we have inherited skin color, the skin color traits, and sleep patterns from Neanderthals, and hair color as well. So I've seen articles on Neanderthal giving us or not giving us hair color, especially ginger color. I like gingers, by the way. I've always said that. I think I've said that before. And this article that I posted is in favor. In fact, it's not in favor. It shows that yes, the Neanderthals did lend us some genetic material that influenced our skin color, eye color, hair color, and sleep patterns and other things. So yeah, just something a little bit interesting. And now, including those playing a role in disease risk, both light and dark skin pigmentations confer benefits. Darker skin, for example, is believed to help prevent some of the negative impacts of ultraviolet light exposure. Basically, the darker your skin is, the less likely you are to get sunburn, and that would reduce risks of other factors like melanomas. But in contrasting, lighter skin color is better able to promote synthesis of vitamin D in regions with low ultraviolet light exposure. That is very, very relevant. Do you know why? Because in those latitudes where the sun and ultraviolet light is low, dark skin is actually a small liability. And later on you will see how it would work, how basically the effects on our evolution. So to I need a drink. I'm sorry, 1 second. Sorry about that. My throat was a bit parched. To objectively capture the range of skin pigmentation in Africa, Tishkov and her colleagues used a color meter to measure the light reflectance of the skin of more than 2,000 Africans from ethnically and genetically diverse populations. So they didn't just take a sample from one area. They took the measurements from the inner arm where sun exposure is minimal. Because if the more exposure you get to the sun, the more the pigmentation will darken, etc., etc. So you get a darker skin. So, but the natural skin color you have is in areas where you have minimal skin exposure. Thus, you see that stereotypical. Well, when I lived in Australia, he was that guy who would wear those. What are those shirts that don't have sleeves? Those type of shirts. And when he took them off, you could see the patterns. Dark where the sun was exposing, and completely white, like a bleached. Ugh! Just thinking of that is horrific. Sorry about that. Giving you that vision of horridness. But yeah, that's what basically happens. So the measurements could be used to infer levels of skin the skin pigment melanin. They obtained a range of measurements. The darkest skin was observed in the Nilo-Saharan pastoralist populations of East Africa. Now, East Africa is Ethiopia, Tanzania, Kenya, going down to the Congo, more or less. That area. They would be the darkest populations. And the lightest skin was observed in the San hunter-gatherer populations in southern Africa, the Kusan and the San people. To my point of view, I'm sort of vindicated in this article. The prototype of all human physical characteristics, at least. I'll try and do one day sort of a small video on that, because I think it's fascinating. I just have to write the script, which I'm really terrible at. Now, the researchers obtained genetic information from nearly 1,600 people, examining more than 4 million single nucleotide polymorphisms across the genome. I don't know what that means, so I will not even touch it. What that means? It's they examined the DNA in specific parts where the DNA code may differ from one letter. So they looked at all the DNA code of everyone. They saw if there was any variations in certain areas of one letter, an AD, anodine, the AD. I can't remember them. It's really, I don't know. I know just enough to get by, but I'm not a geneticist. From this database, the researchers were able to do a genome-wide association study and found 4 key areas of the genome where variation closely correlated with skin color differences. I love these spaces in between that sort of advertisement, but it sort of cuts up the article in blocks, which we can then discuss and not have a lot of too much trouble with copyright and stuff. Now, the regions with the strongest association was in and around the SLC24A5 gene. That's a mouthful. One variant of which is known to play a role in the light skin color in Europeans and some Southern Asian populations, and is believed to have arisen more than 30,000 years ago. So this gene, from what they are saying here, is that it arose 30,000 years ago, and it plays a role in the light skin color in Europeans and some Southern Asian populations. That would be when the more of the Homo sapiens were moving into the northern parts of Eurasia, where less ultraviolet ray exposure was experienced, and as they continue to move, some moved into the Southern Asian areas, which they still are light skin colors compared to other areas, which we'll discuss in a second. This variant is common in populations of the This variant, the variant of SLC45 is common in populations in Ethiopia and Tanzania. And I said before that they were the darker darker skinned areas of Africa. That were known to have ancestry from Southeast Asia and the Middle East. So this suggests that it was carried into Africa from one of those regions, and based on its frequency may have been positively selected. So there appears to be pastoralists from Southeast Asia and Middle East that moved into the areas of Ethiopia and Tanzania, bringing that gene, that variant of the gene, and they were positively selected, meaning that the carriers were attractive to reproduce, basically. So that's what they mean when it's positively selected, because if you negatively select something, it goes extinct. You don't mate with the person that's carrying it, so that gene dies out. Well, it gets less frequent, and so on. Another region in which the MFSD12 gene, which contains the MFSD12 gene, was the second strongest associated with skin pigmentation. This gene is expressed in low levels in depigmented skin in individuals with vitiligo, a condition where the skin loses pigment in some areas. I'm sure everyone has seen sufferers of this condition. They have blotches of like bleached areas. It's not specific to any ethnic group. Any Homo sapiens can get it, and I've seen from Southeast Asian, Europeans, Africans have it. So yes. See, the Crawford says, I still remember that aha moment when we saw this gene was associated with vitiligo. That's when we knew we found something new and exciting. So they knew about the condition, vitiligo, and they found the gene associated with it, and it's also associated with skin pigmentation. Now, the team found that the mutations in and around this gene were associated with dark pigmentation were present in high frequencies in populations of Nilo-Saharan ancestry. So the Nilo-Saharan peoples have the MFSD12 gene more prevalent, who tend to be very dark skinned, as well as across sub-Saharan populations, except the San, who tend to have a lighter skin. They also, and that is not unexpected, because now they found out that this variant of the gene, causes. I'm sort of jumping ahead of myself, but there are two. They're not molecules. They're different types of melanin, which will be discussed in a bit, and they are controlled by these two genes, the ones that I said before, and this one. So let's see. Who tend to have a lighter skin. They also have identified these variants, as well as others associated with dark skin pigmentation in South Asian Indian and Austro-Melanesian populations, who tend to have the darker skin colorations outside of Africa. So basically the Tamil, well, what is now the Tamil in India, southern Indians, Australian Aborigines, the Melanesians from Papua New Guinea, what are the islands? New Ireland, New England. Those islands are off Papua New Guinea. They are very dark skins, and they have this gene, this gene basically. The origins of the trait, such as skin texture, skin color, hair texture, skin color, and stature, which are shared between some indigenous populations, Melanesia and Australia, and some sub-Saharan Africans, have long been a mystery, Tishkov said. They have argued it's because of the convergent evolution. They thought it was convergent evolution because they lived close to the equator, a lot of sun exposure, a lot of melanin would need to be produced to ward off ultraviolet rays damage, etc., etc. So they thought that was once thought to be the cause, but no. They identify that they independently evolved these mutations, but our study finds that at genes associated with skin color, they have an identical variant associated with dark skin in Africans. So they basically kept those genes that give the higher melanin concentration, the darker skin, because they went to areas of. No, that's not it. They kept those. They have those genes. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I apologize. So our data are consistent with the proposed early migration event of modern humans out of Africa along the southern coast of Asia and into Austro-Melanesia, and then there was a second migration event into other regions. Yes, there was, and it's not just one or two. Apparently, there seems to be multiple migrations, quote unquote, out of Africa and into Eurasia, Africa, Eurasia, Australasia, and the Americas. Um, So, however, it is also possible that there were a single African source population that contained genetic variations associated with both light, dark skinned, and other variants associated with dark pigmentations are maintained only in Southern Asians and Austro-Melanesians, lost in Eurasians due to natural selection. That's another possibility. They give two hypotheses. One was that the first one group of Homo sapiens left Africa, went around the coast of India and into what is now Australia and Melanesia and etc., Papua New Guinea and so on. Then came other variants. Another one that it's proposed that's also valid is that there was only one stock Homo sapiens group, and when they left Africa, they would be naturally selected by the region that they lived in. They're two hypotheses, so they're both valid until proven otherwise. So also of interest was a genetic variant of MFSD12, OCA2, and HERC2 associated with light skin pigmentation were at highest frequencies in the African San population. So the gene variants of the first gene, MFS12, is the OCA2 and HERC2. They are associated with the San people, African San people, which are the oldest genetic lineages in the world, as well as the Europeans. So this phrase here, this sentence here says that the Europeans and the San, having these two gene variants of this one, the MFSD12, is the oldest genetic lineage in the world, and all the others, this one could have came out of these two when they said before return to Africa event occurred from the Ethiopians and the Tanzanians having genetic markers that are from Southeast Asia and Middle East, and that were positively selected for. Yeah. MFS12 is highly expressed in melanocytes, the cells that produce melanin. To verify the gene's role in contributing to skin pigmentation, the researchers blocked expressions of the genes in cells in culture and found an increase in production of eumelanin. Now, eumelanin, if you block this gene MFSD12, you produce the eumelanin, which is the pigment type responsible for dark and brown skin, hair and eye color. And they've knocked out that gene in zebrafish, which caused the loss of cells that produced the yellow pigment. And in mice, knocking out that gene or disabling it by genetic manipulation, it changed the color of the coat from a goatee, caused by the hairs with a red and yellow pigment, to a uniform grey, by eliminating the production of the pheomelanin, a type of pigment also found in humans. Now, the pheomelanin is very interesting because it's the opposite of the eumelanin. If you knock out eumelanin, you produce dark colors. But if you eliminate the pheomelanin, you produce a dark in mice, knocking out the gene changed the color from coat to a goatee. I know what colors that is. Caused by hairs with a red and yellow pigment. now to uniform grey by eliminating production of the... Oh, if you knock out that gene, you knock out the production of pheomelanin, also a type of pigment found in... It's a bit confusing, this. I've read it about 5 times and I'm still not unsure what they mean. It's probably in the article, the study itself, but it's behind a paywall. Apart from one study showing that MFSD12 was associated with vitiligo lesions, we didn't know much else about it, said Crawford. So these functional assays were really crucial. Now, we went beyond most genome-type association studies to the functional and assays, Tishkov said. We found that knocking out MSFD12 dramatically impacted the pigmentation of fish and mice. We know that. And by pointing this to being a very conserved trait across species, so they are carried positively. They are selected for instead of selected against. We didn't know exactly why, but blocking this gene caused a loss of pheomelanin production and an increase in eumelanin production. Pheomelanin is light, eumelanin produces dark. I've had to write it down because that, like I said, it didn't really make sense. Where was I? I didn't know. Yes. We also, by blocking, we also showed that Africans have a lower level of MSSD12 expression, which makes sense, as low levels of the gene means more eumelanin production, more dark skin pigmentation. A collaborator of the work, Michael Marks, a professor of departments of pathology and laboratory medicine and sociology at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and Penn Medicine, demonstrated that MFSD12 gene influences eumelanin pigmentation in a novel manner. Unlike other pigmentation genes, which are expressed mainly in the melanosomes, the organelles where melanin is produced, the MFSD12 is expressed in lysosomes, a distinct organelle from the melanosomes that produce eumelanin. So we're basically saying we have 2 types of cells that produce skin pigmentation, and MFSD12 is more is expressed in the lysosomes instead of the organelles, instead of the melanosomes. I don't know. I honestly am not a biologist or as in this field of genetics and that, but I can see that it's reasonable. Yes, not reasonable. That's the wrong word. I see how it works. If you express one of the organelles more than the other, you get a different type of skin pigmentation, of skin color. Even though both are there, one is more expressed than the other. So we actually have both possibilities of having dark. We already have the dark skin possibility, but because of gene expression, else is the MFSD12. If it's expressed or not, it gives you the skin color, and that is basically why we get that. There's that what is it called again? What is it called? That condition what is it? Vitiligo. That's the one. Yeah. Okay. Our results suggest that some of the must be some kind of as yet uncharacterized form of crosstalk between lysosomes and the melanosomes. So they don't yet know how that works. That to make the eumelanins, which is the darker skin pigmentation, expression, organelles type things. Figuring out how this works might provide new ideas of ways of manipulating skin pigmentation for therapeutic means. Or not. I already see a possibility, and I'm not going to express it here, but I might do it after the stream ends in the chat. Well, not the stream ends, just before I wrap up in the chat. So be prepared. In fact, I might even write it down now while I'm here. that possibility of the therapy could enable to live out his dream. And that other one, I can't remember her, but you know who I mean. So this person to live out his yearnings. So anyway, let's get back to the article. In addition, Mark said, in fact, that the loss of MFSD12 expressions had opposite effects on two types of melanins. Increasing new melanin production while suppressing pheomelanins suggests that melanosomes that make pheomelanins might be more related to lysosomes than those that make eumelanin. Okay, I can't. I can only accept that because I don't know. Another association with skin colors were found in the OCA2 and HERC2 genes, which have been linked to skin, eye, and hair color variations in Europeans. Though the mutation identified are novel, mutations of the OCA2 are also caused by a form of albinism that is more common in Africans than any other populations, and we can see that in albinos in East Africa, which are not having a very good time there, and in some parts of West Africa, which are also not having a very good time there. I won't bore you with the details, but it's tragic and very barbaric as well. The research observed genetic variants in the neighboring gene HERC2, which regulate the expressions of OCA2. Within OCA2, they identified a variant common in Europeans and the San that is associated with short versions of the protein, with an altered function. They observed the signal of balancing selections of OCA2, meaning that two different versions of the gene have been maintained, in this case for more than 600,000 years. Now, this is a very, very interesting marker. What happened about 600,000 years ago? At more or less that time, up to 650, 680,000 years ago, we're figuring out the more or less the general time frame. Our last common ancestor of Homo sapiens sapiens, Homo sapien neanderthalensis, and Homo sapien denisovians was the dominant, the primary hominid, Homo sapien, not Homo sapien, but our common ancestor was there. And now, if he was also present, this hominin was present in Africa and Eurasia. So he would have been exposed to a lot of variations in climatic conditions, sun exposure, etc. And if that gene was maintained, not just and we know that the Europeans have genetic, due to inbreeding, have genetic expressions from both Neanderthals. Well, the Europeans from Neanderthals, and we're Eastern Asians from Denisovans, and Australians, Denisovans also in the Americas. It is not too far to suggest that that's how this gene was maintained in existence, and that was our Homo antecessor, our common ancestor, was had that that mutation that caused the differences in pigmentations. So it is very, very telling and quite exciting. that is probably why in that article of the Neanderthals, which I have in the description, says that we may have gotten skin color, hair color, and also sleep patterns and other diseases from Neanderthals, who got them from our common ancestor, both common ancestor, from Homo antecessor. Heidelbergensis, by the way. That's who I think it is. So what this tells us, Tishkov says, that is there likely more selective force maintaining these two alleles? What this tells us, Tishkov, is likely some selective force maintaining these two alleles. These two alleles are very important to give us our skin color. It is likely that this gene is playing a role in other aspects of human physiology, which are important. Of course, no gene is just, I think, from what I know a little bit about genetics, is that no single gene just governs one aspect or one thing. It governs a lot of things, like in this case of the OCA2 and HERC, eye color, skin color, and what's the other one? Eye, skin, and hair color. So they are linked. So it's not just one thing. Now, the final genetic region for the researchers found to be associated with skin pigmentation includes genes that play a role in ultraviolet light response and melanoma risk. The top candidate gene in the region is BBD1. Sounds like Star Wars reference, that. The BB robot, or whatever, the BBD1. Involved in repairing DNA after exposure to UV light, because UV light, when it hits our skin, it's just a short enough wavelength to actually penetrate deep enough into our skin to actually damage our DNA. Ultraviolet A doesn't penetrate our skin, but ultraviolet B, if I'm not mistaken, does penetrate our skin. There are two variants of the ultraviolet light, and that's the one that they're talking about. Africans don't get melanoma very often. They do, but not as often. So it's not, you can't say that Africans don't get skin cancer. They do, just not as often as light-skinned people. And when I say Africans, he means the dark-skinned Africans, not the light-skinned ones. The variants near these genes are highest in populations who live in areas of the highest ultraviolet light intensity, close to the equator, more or less, or between the two what are they called? God damn it! The two tropics, between the two tropic lines, the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, in that general area. So it makes sense that they may be playing a role in UV protection. Yes. Okay. Yep. If they found that in those areas and they get less skin melanomas than outside of those areas, then yes. The mutation identified by the team play a role in regulating expression of the DDB1 and other nearby genes. So they found that mutation that control the reparations of the gene of the damaged DNA, and it's associated with darker skin. Still not correlation, still not complete causation, but they're getting there. Though we don't know yet. So they don't know the mechanism by which BBD1 is impacting the pigmentation. So there's no causation and correlation by causation. It is of interest to note that this gene, which is highly conserved across species, so not just Homo sapiens sapiens have it, and not just primates have it, but other animals have it, which play a role in pigmentations in plants, such as tomatoes, or tomatoes, if you want to. I say tomatoes, so. Said Tishov, so it's not just species, whole kingdoms, in fact. The team saw evidence that the region of the genome has been a strong target of natural selection outside of Africa. The mutations associated with light skin color swept to nearly 100% frequencies in non-Africans, one of the few examples of the selective sweep is all Eurasians. The age of the selective sweep was estimated to be around 660 to 80,000 years ago. So it was about the time we basically colonized Europe, and not just Europe, but at least that beginning. So as we were leaving Africa, and in this migration, I'm still for more than one migrations though, and I've said this before because they found in Neanderthals genetic markers of Homo sapiens, not Homo sapiens sapiens, but at least Homo sapiens 200,000 years ago, in Western Europe, Spain in particular. Now they were Homo sapiens sapiens, I'll take that back. And that's when we selected for the lighter color. Well, we selected. Naturally, Homo sapiens sapiens selected for the lighter color as they moved north into Eurasia, because there was less ultraviolet light. You need ultraviolet light to produce. You need ultraviolet light to produce vitamin D, and if you block it in the northern, as the further north you go, you produce less. So you need to not block it to produce more. I hope that made sense. Critique me if I say something stupid. That's how I learn myself. So I'm reading genetics. This is an interesting in me, but I'm not an expert in genetics. I'm more an expert in bones and tools and so on. So. The team saw evidence that the region of the genome has been strongly targeted for that. In addition, an additional takeaway from the work is a broader picture of the evolution of skin color in humans. Most of the genetic variants associated with light and dark skinmentation from another study to have originated more than 300,000 years ago. So Homo sapiens sapiens. We now appear to have appeared around between 350 to 280,000 years ago in Africa. So, and some emerged roughly 1 million years ago. Some of these variations, these gene markers, etc., or these genes, alleles, whatever you want to call them, I don't know. They appeared 1 million years ago. So Homo erectus, as the candidate, who is more or less in direct line of our evolutionary pattern. So yeah, which is well before the emergence of modern humans. The older version of these variants in many cases was the one associated with lighter skin, suggesting that perhaps the ancestral state of humans was moderately pigmented rather than dark pigmented skin. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Maybe that because of certain environmental factors, more trees, more shade, they could protect themselves from ultraviolet radiation. The Homo erectus, which is the 1 million year old candidate, left Africa quite early, 1.2, 1.4 million years ago, and into Eurasia, so they would have had time to select for the lighter skin colors. I don't know. Honestly, these are just supposition. These are just assertions and of mine and guesses, hypotheses that could be tested if they want easily. They can be tested. I personally can't test them. I'm just making the assertions. But if someone who listens to this or sees this as I see it, and says, "Shit, can we let's test this out and see what happens." So if you were to shave a chimp, it has light pigmentation. Tishoff said, "Yeah, but this is no." She's suggesting that our early ancestors, say Homo erectus, would have been hairy, and there's no evidence for that, so let's not go into that. So it makes sense that skin color of ancestors of modern human could have been relatively light. Yeah, okay, but we don't know if they were hairy or not. That's the problem. We know that possibly at least Homo sapiens, Neanderthalensis, Denisovians, and even us, Homo sapiens 300,000 years ago, may have used clothing. I said may. We have no direct evidence yet. So we'll see. So I don't know, really. It is likely that when we lost the hair covering our bodies and moved from forest to open savanna, we became darker skins. Yes, but that doesn't explain Homo erectus. Mutations influencing both light and dark skin have continued to evolve in humans even within the past few thousand years. Of course. Because even mutation, people naturally select for something. It's the aesthetics. Why are birds colored? Why are most animals, especially dimorphic, high dimorphic species, which means males usually being bigger than females, why are they usually more colorful than males? Or other aspects. I'm just saying what happens in nature, not just humans. But why and the females drab, because the females are the ones that reproduce, but the males have to show that they are the strongest, and maybe in areas where you have low ultraviolet or too much ultraviolet light, and you don't burn as much, because when you burn you look like a lobster, boiled lobster. So when you see a potential mate, the female sees a potential mate that's not red as a lobster and sick, because you do feel sick when you get burned, that could be a contributing factor to selecting for a mate. It happens in nature. This is not controversial. We are no different from other animals. And those who put us above that, humans above that, are religious folks and social justice warriors type thing, third wave feminism and all that. And there goes my monetization. Oh well, fuck it. So Tishoff noted that the underscores work underscores the diversity of Africans' populations and the lack of support for biological notions of race. This is it. This is super important, and I won't even need to say why. I'll just read it again. Tishkoff noted that the work that they have done underscores the diversity of African populations and the lack of support for biological notions of race. Many of the genes and new genetic variants we identified to be associated with skin color may never have been found outside of Africa because they are not as highly variable, Tishoff said. They are also there is so much diversity in Africa that's not often appreciated. Of course not, and we know why. There's no such thing as an African race. Hallelujah. We have shown, and that applies to all others, by the way. We have shown skin color is extremely variable on the African continent and that it is still evolving. Furthermore, the more cases of genetic variants associated with light skin arose in Africa. And that ends one of my favorite articles which I've read in a while, because it is, even though I don't understand most of the science, I can see this is this is basically debunks a lot of pseudoscience we have there. We have, oh damn, I have to, there, I was showing some copyrighted things, so I hope I don't get into trouble with this image, because it was on the internet. It's a Getty image of a cave, so I'll have to change it. Oh well. So let's have a look at the chat. How'd you guys find it, by the way? I found it sometime in certain parts of the article. I found it a little bit boring, but the first part and the second part was, in my opinion, very, very exciting. Oh no, Davey, the chat didn't kill my monetization. The chat's not recorded; it doesn't appear on the final video. So yes, I think it is confusing, Davey. Absolutely, yes. So do you think exposure to the sun doesn't count for much? No, Dave, it does count, because, like I said in the final part, I'll try to do an analogy. I'll do a reverse analogy to select for lighter skin color. You go into northern latitudes where you have a less exposure to ultraviolet light, so you become more sickly, and persons who have a lighter skin color would be more healthy, so they would be selected for, because it's a fact that all animals, in order to pass on their genes, they have to be the most fittest, and to be the most fittest, there are characteristics which are evident by looking at them. So that's more or less why it would count somehow as much. Yes. Damn it. My Greek friend. I can't talk about traps, man. But yeah. Last question. I think. Yes, Maleficent, most likely. I also got, as you saw, I also got sort of confused in the middle bit, because I'm not a geneticist, and genetics can be bloody complicated and boring. Most of archaeology and science is boring, as most of the articles produced are. I used this one. I could have used the more mainstream media New York Times one, which is in the description. You guys read that and read this, and you will see that would have been more watered down, more less boring, you could say. But and I also read I like this one because it has the actual science. I tried to do the actual science because I couldn't show you the study, and this was a good summary of the actual study, so that's why I chose it. So yes, yeah. Okay, people. I'm going to wait. Caves and tree covers. Yes, exactly. Okay, I'm going to stop the stream, and 1 hour. It's a good thing. I thought it would go for a bit more or a bit less. So, thank you for coming on, and till my next stream. I want to see if I can play around more with OBS, and my other streams. Mondays will be always archaeology. This is an announcement. If I do anything else during the week, which I'm going to try and do, it won't be. But I need views. So, good night.